Welcome to Soul to Soul Conversations. I am SatoriSeals, operating as your soul guider from the Living Soul Numerology Soul Guidance System for this podcast. As we all know, to tune in to join our movement, the Soul to Soul movement, feel free to text 1-833-475-0111 and type Soul to Soul as one word. Make the S capitalized, so it's a capital S-O-U-L, number 2, capital S-O-U-L. Also in support of mental health and for emotional steadiness or for the sense of feeling balance. Also text the exact same number, 1-833-475-0111. But instead, you will type inner calm as one word. That's INNERCALM, inner calm. And so that's currently is one of our high demand products for people are using to be able to relax, to unwind, to support their, mental well-being. So we're just glad that it's resonating with a lot of people that's out there. We thank you for trusting Wisdom Therapeutics, Herbal Therapy to support you in that area of your life. So now, we kind of got that out the way, right? Some people asking what I've been up to. Well, I've been up to some interesting things. I have a couple books coming out. One book coming out real soon, hopefully before Mother's Day. And this book is called Soul Rights. And I'm looking forward to bring that out because, just to make it real quick, Soul Rights is going to help us understand what our soul rights are, just as what it says, but also is going to help us to have a tool to help us discern soul abuse. So if you're interested in that, be on the lookout for that. Soul Rights, and that's coming real soon. So I've been working on that. Actually, it's done. It was just we're putting together all some of the technical things to get it ready so it can be available in ebook form and then eventually in a hard book form. Okay, so what's been interesting that's been going on, I think a lot of y'all probably can sense it. I definitely sense it, and it seems like things just been kind of seeming awkward, right? It's like after the eclipse occurred, I think a couple of days afterwards, just the interaction with people seems kind of a little different, like a little off step, where we might be used to taking 2 steps. Now we're taking 1 step to get to something, or it seemed like when you're supposed to go right, everybody wants to go left. Whereas, it seems like people are just a little more, it's just a lot of awkwardness that's been kind of going on. And I've been noticing that kind of personally. And so I was discerning that, and I said, well, let me make sure this ain't just personal with myself. I kind of, tapped the shoulder of some people that I know that I'm close to, and they've been kind of sensing the same thing. And I said, well, hold up. Let me consult the living soul. So I got in nerd mode a little bit and got into the living soul and started to pull the different numbers. And there was some interesting things that jumped out that I felt, and I was moved, especially after I meditated, to share with everyone on the podcast. Okay. And that's everyone that's been kind of following. So hopefully this speaks to everyone, and hopefully you can pull something out of it, or just receive some additional insight on the flexibility and the range what the living soul kind of can help us see as things pertain to influencing our inner well-being or our soul nature, right? So what I begin to discover is there was interesting connected activity that explains some of this awkwardness. And so today what I want to do is talk about awkward engagements. And before I get all into the meat of what I want to bring out, let me share this. Energy is always moving, okay? And energy is always moving, but it's also always taking on different positions each day just similar like how the moon goes through different phases. And so based on these positions, there's a certain energetic alignment that becomes more prevalent over each day. Okay, I want to coin this as an energetic positional alignment. And I'm saying that to say this to help back up what I'm about to say here. Hopefully it could be understood. So we know that energy is constantly moving, and energy precedes reality. So each day hosts energy. But in those days, there's an energetic alignment that becomes more influential. And that level of influence corresponds with the 4 different astral archetypes, as you heard me mention before, when I talk about, writing out those 4 squares. So we know based off of the moon, the sun, the earth, and the living soul archetype alignments. Well, based on these alignments, really help us get a clue and insight into the energy dynamic or the positional energy that's becoming more influential. Now, associated with the different soul archetypes are energy positions, and we designate those energy positions based upon the gender and positional relationship. And so I say gender positional relationship, what I'm referring to as the masculine, okay, and the feminine that most of us understand. Now, it turns out up under the gender positional, there's 3 forces that aligns with that. So we have the masculine energy, we have the androgynous energy, and the feminine energy. Now, for the sake of confusion, I know y'all, when I just said gender position, I mentioned masculine and feminine. I omitted androgynous on purpose because technically androgynous is genderless. If you notice, I quickly after that said there are 3 forces that are associated. And so I brought in the androgynous piece. But just for sake of conversation, I'm acknowledging these 3 different forces, but we consider it under the gender position. The androgynous connected to the gender positions, but it's genderless. The androgynous energy is responsible for the interplay or the counterbalancing between the masculine and feminine. So that's how the androgynous energy is related or is connected to those gender positions. So that's why we, just for conversation's sake, that's why we will interject and include androgynous energy with the masculine and feminine gender energies. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So for gender energy positions, we have the masculine, androgynous, and feminine energy. Each of these different energies takes on 3 different positions. It can take on the dominant position, neutral position, or submissive position. Based on these positions, there's certain designations with each number in the living soul system, 1 through 9. Okay, and they all have a gender assignment to them and a positional assignment to them. So that's why we say gender positional alignment. So the gender can either be masculine, androgynous, or feminine, or the position can be either dominant, neutral, or submissive. And those energies are just behind us. Those energies are inside of us as well, because remember, we are walking animated principles. So we also have these gender positional energies inside of us. And this is how we can identify in your living soul profile. If, say, for example, a woman has some masculine energy in her profile chart and a man might have some feminine energy in his profile chart, doesn't mean that he's a woman. We're talking about the energy. Energy is talking about what moves and what our psychological tendency may favor in terms of how we move as a soul. Okay. And so we'll hit that details on some other time. All right, but I just want to just list that. So basically, in all that just said, all that, there's a certain mix, okay, of the gender energy position that's aligned with the soul archetypes for that day that comes more forward and begins to move and begin to leverage its influence more than the other gender energy positions and the soul archetypes that are also still active at the exact same time. It's just that a certain mix is more elevated, which then it has more influence. Okay, so based upon that, we begin to do an energy forecast for the day. This is how we begin to pull the energy forecast. And if you want to understand more about that, we have soul profile training, the living soul system, where you can learn the details about that. Okay, so, but just understand, just like back in the day when we can open the newspaper and look at the horoscope for the day and kind of get that, the living soul allows us to get the energy forecast for the day, for the week, for the month, or whatever, to kind of just get an understanding of what energies that might be more influential in connection with our living soul profile. So that helps us to realize how we might respond, or how we might operate, or what we might be more susceptible to react to or not react to, etc. Okay, so, but just in a very vague stance, the day independently has its own energetic mix that is contained in each day that has more influence. Okay, and so here's a visual. Do this real fast. As we've done before, I want you to take the 4 different squares like you did before. Draw out your 4 different squares from left to right. Okay, and then up under these 4 squares, I want you to draw a circle. Right, and if you remember, the first square you could put on top of it as the moon, put the letter M. The second square you can put S on top of it for the sun. The third square you can put E, that represents the earth. And then the last 4th square you can put S, or you can put LS, whichever is fine, which represents the living soul, or the soul. Now the bottom of those squares, I want you to take an arrow from that square and draw it to that circle right below it, and do each of those 4 squares and do the exact same thing. The point is that what I'm showing you is that these different archetype alignments, or these astral archetype alignments, all have a direct influence upon us as a soul. So inside that circle, put write you, and then put /soul. So these all have influence upon you. And based upon you, each day has a mix of 4 different archetypes. They could be individual, they can be double, they could be quadruple, whatever, but it has a direct influence upon you. So basically each day has its own energetic profile that can be matched with your soul profile. And you want more details on that, you can get a living soul report, and you can begin to see what your living soul profile consists of. And basically the relationship, when you compare the daily profile with your soul profile, we begin to pull certain insights out of that. But since we're speaking right now to the general broad consensus of everyone that's listening, we're applying it for the day itself. Okay, and so just to go a little more deeper, so the moon represents that atmospheric force in life. The sun represents that solar force. The earth represents that gravitational force, and that soul, or living soul, represents the psychic force. So these different type of forces affects you, which is inside that circle. Okay, now the mix of the day, right now I'm highlighting today is actually April 18th, and I begin to notice an interesting pattern, interesting connection that supports the message that we're getting from the living soul as awkward engagements. So we're in a period of we're in a small window throughout this month right now where there seem like the awkward engagements is a little more heightened. And I'm going to support the math on why that is so without trying to lose everyone. Okay. So before I go into that, I want you to get your pen again, and I want you to draw 3 horizontal lines going left to right. Make sure you leave a space between each line. So take 3 lines and draw it from left to right. Leave a space between each other so that way we can see a space in between those. Then once you do that, I want you to draw 3 vertical lines that crosses over those horizontal lines. Okay, make sure you leave a space. Now go back to those horizontal lines. All right, on the very top one. So it's basically gonna give you 4 different spaces for simplicity. So the top line, just draw a bunch of circles going across from left to right. The second line, draw like a wave line, to go from left to right. And then the third, put a bunch of X's and go from left to right. And then the bottom 4th section, put a bunch of dots going left to right. Now, if you look at it from the vertical sense, you start to see this energy is all mixed. Okay, and that's the point when it is. Energy is active, and because we have all these different energies operating, they're all operating in its own frequency and its own emanation. But there are times throughout the month, there's times throughout the year, there's time within ourselves where certain energies will stand out more. Okay, so the circles might stand out more, the X's might stand out more. So what we're doing, or the mix, so what we're doing is pulling out what stands out more to us as it influences our particular behavior or the behavior of the general public. Okay, so what is interesting is when you look at April, today's April 18th, and you look at the 15th, well, you look at the April 15th, 18th, and the 21st, we see that they're all 3 days apart. There's a connection, there's a pattern there. And I say it to say this. There are times in the living soul system where we acknowledge something called, I like to call them as conflict clouds. And conflict clouds are when there is a connection with the 9, the soul protector, okay? And there's a connection with the 9, and the connection rolls over to 3 different days in a pattern, like the 15th, 18th, and 21st. And within that 9 has several different connections that's connected to tension or imbalance. And so when we begin to see a variety of connections in this window, and this example is the 15th, the 18th, and the 21st, that begins to create what we call a conflict cloud. And this conflict cloud is showing itself as awkward engagements. Okay? So these are associated with the strong, I mentioned the number 9. The number 9 operates under, it houses a variety of things, but the obvious thing we know is security and conflict. That's the domain that oversees the soul protector, the number 9. And so conflict is a part of life. So anytime you see conflict going on in your life, that's the connection of showing you the number 9 is operating, if you want to put a number on it. So you think about all the conflicts you probably have had from, let's say, from April 14th through April, ongoing up to now, to the 18th. Or probably by the time I hear it, it'd be the 19th probably. Think about all the conflicts that you ran into. Count them. That's showing you the number 9 acting out. It's emanating. That's the number 9. So anywhere you got conflict at, that's connected to the number 9. Okay, so what we're doing is, in a larger scale, is looking at the energetics that emanates from the 9 and seeing how that spills over into a certain radius of days. And when it has a strong connection, a strong inroad, we call that a conflict cloud. And so I identified this month a conflict cloud, which is interesting because this month is April and is overseen by the soul lover. The soul lover is about relationships, deep connection. is also about being mindful of your preservation, and it coincides nicely in harmony with the number 8, which is overseeing this whole year, okay, which is the soul communicator. So there's a good connection on the domain level over this month. But inside the month, it becomes like an umbrella, and you have a variety of activities. That's why I had you draw those horizontal lines and those vertical lines to show you there's a mix of energy that's always active, always moving. And right now, we see that there's a certain sequence, right, that's jumping out ahead of all the other energy and emanations that's going on throughout the month. And so what we're doing is on the soul level, we're capturing what it is, and we can do it by tracing it to the activity from the 9 in all the positions that have a tension position or imbalance position that corresponds with the 9. And so within the window of April 15th, 18th, and the 21st, we see a strong connection. So we also are factoring that because of a strong connection in that pattern, there's also a spillover. So basically from April 14th on through April 24th, 10-day window, I begin to recognize that there is a conflict cloud that exists that's manifesting as awkward engagement. So that's why we're focused on this today. Okay. And so the 9, and so not going into detail, but between the 15th, the 18th, and the 21st, the 9 is very active in relation to tension and imbalance. And because that is operating, it creates this cloud force, okay? So what drives a conflict cloud? Here are 4 basic things I like to say that drives a conflict cloud. Conflicting agendas. The agendas are not matching. So you might find yourself where, well, I thought we were supposed to do this, but why are we doing this now? You might start seeing a lot that happen in this little window right here. Like, well, that's not what was communicated to me. So why are we doing this now? That is probably a conflict cloud. Okay, that's an awkward engagement. In other words, there's more of an opportunity to create something difficult inside an engagement, right? Everyone's changing plans more frequently during this time. Well, what's that doing? It's going against certain set expectations. I expected us to meet at 12 o'clock. The last several days, we didn't even meet up at all, and no one gave us a heads up. That's awkward. It created a difficult engagement. Okay. It even could be some just wild stuff. All of a sudden, it's like you start getting all these things that just disrupts your normal flow. Like you're used to always getting up at a certain time, but some reason in these last several days, you're getting up later or you're getting up earlier. It's awkward. It's different. Something got inserted a little bit different. Okay, so that's what we're acknowledging right now, this conflict cloud. And because you might have got up later or whatever, it throw your balance off, it throw how you move off, right? The obvious part, if you get up late, then you're probably getting late to work or whatever, or wherever that appointment or wherever that relationship or whatever is going on, there's an effect from that. Okay, so conflicting agendas. The second thing can be misaligned communication. The communication can just, you're communicating, but it seems like everyone is not understanding. We know one of the end results of communication, we want to make sure that we at least understand everyone's viewpoints. But it appears like that's hard to get across. It appears like everyone just cannot understand a viewpoint beyond their own. That is an awkward engagement. It could be mismatched intentions. The third thing, mismatched intentions. And I guess I used a little example before, like, well, I thought we were going to do this, then this switches up. So all of a sudden, we just, what we agreed upon, we're seeing the opposite happen. I can remember personally, this is not recent, this is, a couple of years ago. I remember it was like a big event that we were planning. So I remember myself, my team, and we were talking with, the other people that were trying to coordinate something. And we had this long video meeting for about 2 hours to just lay out certain things. And so we all agreed how we was going to move. Then literally the very next day, this individual begins to change up certain stuff, change up the content that we wanted to represent our brand and so forth. And I was at the point, I was going to just disengage. And then people from my team was like, no, go ahead and move through with it. But it was against how I move. They know how I move a certain way. And it bothered me. But at the end of the day, it was awkward. It was just awkward. That was a mismatched intention. Like, for example, y'all know I'm a black man. Why are you showing someone that's beyond me, and I have content showing me doing what I do? Why are you trying to show another face representing what I do? That was a mismatched intention. That's a no-no. And we was getting ready to just back out of all the agreements we had to undergo this type of thing. So that's just an example of an awkward engagement. It was very awkward. It wasn't really good for business. It was a misrepresentation of the brand, and it's something I did not agree with. Okay. The fourth thing is conflicts in priority. We know everyone's priorities are different, and it's sad a lot of times when things are heated, your priorities seem like to be the only priority that exists. So if you're in a group dynamic, a lot of times, if you got multiple priorities and they haven't been scaled properly, then that's going to generate awkward engagements. Okay, so these are some of the things that can drive the awkward engagement just on a very top level. Okay, you can use your imagination to think of many other different scenarios. Okay, so in this, that creates a conflict cloud, as I mentioned. And I told you the conflict clouds are very connected to the position of the number 9 inside our living soul profile, and also inside the action throughout the month. And we recognize there's a connecting pattern between 3 days, and it has multiple legs that extend to the tension or imbalanced position. We have a clouded conflict. So the clouded conflicts can look at people start to instigate you more. You see people just trying to bait you, just for no reason, just baiting you. I had a situation last month, and I had to deliver something for somebody. Because someone needed something, so I can just bring it to you. And it was actually middle of the day, and some reason the whole street was all blocked or whatever, and there was no parking spots to get in. I just need to get right into this place real fast to go into the building. So right next door was like this kinder care place. And so the spots, I just had like a little spot where you could just park in real fast. It didn't say you couldn't park there or anything like that. So I just parked it real fast, left my, I didn't even turn off my vehicle, because I literally was going to go right across. I was going to probably take less than 50 steps to get where I need to drop off this item for this person. And this lady just came out, of course, a Karen, right? And began to just yell, you can't do that, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, hey, I'm just going right here. I'll be right back. And I'm pulling out. I said, and it was obvious there was no other place to park. It was packed. And she just kept going on. And this woman, this Karen, pulls out her phone trying to video record me like I'm doing something off the chain. And I looked at her and I said, you are being petty, and you're showing your own pettiness. I am actually leaving. I just had to drop this item off right here. Kind of something, somebody just needed me to drop off something to them, and I dropped it off to them. And that's an example of, and actually during that time, it was a conflict cloud, and I did not respond to it. Just think about it. You got a brother and a Karen. Now, if I would have matched her pettiness, it wouldn't have looked good, right? It wouldn't look good at all. So that's an example of somebody trying to instigate. I mean, she literally, when I told her you're being petty, it's like she just like, I popped her balloon. Like the air came out of like, oh, I said, go back in there. It was just silly. It made no sense. It was like she was looking for something to stir up, and you wasn't gonna get it from me. I just didn't have it to do. Okay. And so that's the instigation. So people can be petty. A lot of times we know people can say one thing versus another. So we see a lot of forked tongue communication that becomes more heightened. You see a lot of people just being fake. You know how that is. Then also it feels like during this time there's a conflict cloud, you almost feel emotionally suffocated, not by anybody. It's like an atmospheric thing. You just feel like boxed in emotionally, like suffocated. That's also something you can just tell. And I went through that a couple of days in this little window I'm talking about between, April 14th and, now it's kind of like, yo, what's going on? Matter of fact, as I was putting some stuff together for this book that I mentioned, Soul Rights, I had the whole day laid out. I was going to just do some things during the day. And for some reason, I could not get into the energy of doing what I need to do. And it was interesting. I just flowed with it. I didn't force anything. And then it was interesting that later on that night, all of a sudden I had this burst of energy to just go do what I need to do and add some things into the book that I need to add into, and and all that stuff, so forth. And that was just an example. And I realized that day, I said, oh, that day, not me, but the atmosphere in the day in the area where I live at, it was real erratic. It was just, you could tell the psychic force was just erratic. It was very erratic. So it wasn't conducive to write. It was probably even hard to really meditate in the midst of that heightening of that erratic activity, whatever it was connected to. So once it died down, people were going to bed and so forth, it began to open up and let up. And once that happened, I was able to get the inspiration and the motivation to do what I needed to do. All right, that's an example of the stuffiness or that emotional suffocation that can feel during the conflict cloud. During the conflict cloud, you just feel that a lot. You just feel, you feel edgy. You're like, yo, what's going on? It feels strange. You're probably in the midst of a conflict cloud, okay? And so when you're in that, it affects behavior. People are edgy. People are trying to test you, right? People are, just making up lies about you. All kinds of dumb shit, just happens. I know I had a lot of issues going on with technology. Like, it was like 2 days in a row, there was mishaps going on with the technology that I use. And I was like, yo, what's going on here? So during these times, you have to make sure you don't get caught up in what's going on and be able to pause and step back and recognize and assess the whole situation and pull yourself back in and make sure you don't get caught up in this particular wave that's connected to the conflict cloud, okay? So with that in mind, so how do we deal with that? Here's the thing, I want you to think about, how can we also describe a conflict cloud? It's like, if you think about a thunderstorm, think about the day or so, what the atmosphere was like before the thunderstorm came. It was probably stuffy, and it's like you couldn't breathe. And that's symbolic of like all of our pent in emotions and all this stuff going on. And so the conflict cloud comes, it's like the thunderstorm. And so after the thunderstorms happen, it brings a release from tension. And then after that tension is gone, we all can breathe freely. And so that's one of the purposes of the conflict cloud. Sometimes conflict must occur in order to release the tension. And I say that to say, this is a segue into this. This is also interesting. So throughout this whole month of April, the living soul archetype position that's represented by a number in relationship to the sun archetype position relates to the number based on, it showed that every day this month, each soul archetype will visit a tension position with the sun alignment. Interesting. Now, what's also interesting is, as we're going and we're graduating slowly over into the month of May, we're seeing that tension position will now change into a harmonious position. So basically all the soul archetypes in the month of May, in relation between the living soul archetype to the sun archetype, will all visit a harmonious position. So that's another insight that the living soul is showing us, is that don't fight against the tension. Sometimes some tension is good. Muscles develop by tension, bones get stronger by tension, and so forth. And sometimes not self-created, or egoic driven tension in relationships, but just the tension coming from just certain misalignments is good that is there, because it might become your thunderstorm that will bring a release of the tension to now move you into harmony. So a lot of us has listened to this today is that some of the tension that you keep dealing with, we might be in this period right now that you're feeling it real strong. Wait for that thunderstorm to come, wait for that lightning to strike the sky. So all of a sudden that reset feel atmospherically comes so you can breathe again. But realize that some of that tension is leading to your harmony. If you've been dealing with a lot of tension, based off of the Living Soul numerical lineups, it's showing us that tension can lead to harmony. And so that's one of the messages that we're getting from this conflict cloud, okay, is that in the midst of all the pettiness, in the midst of people just having hidden agendas, in the midst of everybody just trying to complicate stuff, in the midst of people trying to be nitpicking, the midst of like you get getting these random arguments that don't make sense, understand that that's a thunderstorm and it's soon going to bring a level release of that tension, and you can breathe freely. And when you start to breathe freely, you're going to be more in a harmonious state, and that's going to be in the month of May. So based off of the ego position and the psychic position, there's going to be a little more harmony behind all the other activity that goes on throughout the month as different days change in and out on our energetic positions that's contained for each day. So, but just based off of this view right here, we are going from tension into harmony. There is a release that's affording us after this thunderstorm occurs in our engagements. The awkwardness, the difficulty is pointing to us on how to deal with it. How do we deal with it? One, and when you go through these conflict clouds, you don't match aggression with aggression. You begin to look for the common ground that's shared and everyone that's involved in that engagement. And you position yourself right there. I use the word position on purpose because I didn't mention this before, but when I begin to lay out the matrix for these 10 days that we're looking at in reference to the gender energy position, what jumps out that scores the highest is a feminine position and a neutral position. So when we talk about a feminine position, that's exactly what it does. The feminine is not going to try to go against the grain. The feminine is going to take its position where it's interested at. And in this case, then it's going to take on a neutral position. So it's not going to favor the left or right. It's just going to take its position as energy, and it's not going to try to disrupt what's really going on, but it's going to find the right position so that way it doesn't have to entertain what's right or wrong. So in this type of situation, that's what we all need to do, is find a position where we don't have to entertain what's right or wrong. We're dead smack in the middle. We're just in a neutral position, okay? So what you want to do is find a common ground and position yourself right there until, you know, like I said, that wave blows over. Then you kind of resume, initiate certain things you need to, or support certain things that you need to. But you know, right now you just kind of just find a neutral position, and you find a common ground. And you find the common ground so that way you can have more of a neutral position in the situation. You're just focused on the common ground, and you'll stimulate that. Everything's in common, you'll stimulate that. Okay. Also, during this time, engage in aligned communication. Remember, I mentioned that what drives these conflict clouds is misaligned communication. So you want to engage in aligned communication. Some people, y'all, just want to be difficult. Some people are they have a limited scope, and they only can see in the realms of their own feelings and a realm of their own interests, that it hinders them to recognize what's outside them what other people have to deal with or filter through in their situation. And some people just won't budge from that position to get an understanding of everyone else that's involved. They become very self-centered, and it makes them very parochial or very narrow in scope. They're closed minds, like their minds inside a box. When you're around those kind of people, y'all, won't waste your energy trying to communicate with that, because they can't see outside of their own interests. So what do? Just speak to the common ground that they only can see. Okay? Just speak to what their own interest is, and as you relate to that, and just keep it there. Because anything else beyond that, it's going to cause a disturbance with you. It's going to create a tension inside you because they're short-sighted. So there's no need to dance in that type of engagement. Just speak to their own interests as it applies to them, as it relates to you, and just stay right there, and everything else, you just kind of just fade out and maybe revisit later on if you have to, but not at this moment, not during this time. Okay? As you mentioned before, if you're in a group dynamic, say like you at work or you work on a project, you got business stuff you're trying to do, and it's, dealing with more than one person, a group dynamic, make sure you take the neutral position. In other words, don't focus on your personal aspirations. Focus on the collective reward and just focus on that. So this ain't the time to bring in your own personal agenda into the situation, because that's going to add to the conflict. It's going to make or create a thunderstorm in the situation at that moment. During this time, that's more prevalent and more heightened to occur. Okay. Also, during this time, focus on the position where you can attract what you need. This is not a time where you're really trying to match force with force. So it kind of goes in line with finding that common ground. Find that position and focus on what you can attract to you. For example, people are difficult in communication right now. So it's a waste of words trying to communicate because they're not going to understand what you're saying or respect what you're saying. So you're going to find what interests them, and you're going to see what interests them as it relates to what you need attracted to you. So you'll take that position and you'll just attract from there. That way you're still getting what you probably need in the situation without creating negative waves with them. Okay? You might need them to, it could be all kinds of scenarios, but you're just going to be in that position in alignment with their interests, and also where you can attract their attention to you to kind of meet what you need. And you kind of just operate from that space. It's a science, it's a skill to do, but during these times of conflict clouds, that's kind of how you navigate through them, especially when the score is a feminine neutral position. Okay, so I just kind of wanted to share that. Hopefully that this resonate with some of you. So awkward engagements is something that will happen. Things in life, y'all will understand, is that everything in life is on repeat. So there's going to be different times throughout the year, throughout each month, where you'll get this cloud of conflict. This go around is just showing itself more as an awkward engagement. It will, show itself again, but now you have some, maybe a basis to refer to now to how to work through that and navigate through that. Okay, so take that all in. Appreciate everybody chiming in. Those of you that are on Spotify, go to the app and show a brother some love. Go ahead and follow so you get the notifications on when new episodes are dropping. This is episode 4. But also give me a rating, so that way it can just help the algorithms around the Soul to Soul conversations. But until we meet again, this is episode 4. Appreciate everybody chiming in. Be easy and enjoy your day. One love.